Hey guys, so I wanted to just share with you my process. And I know this is kind of going fast, but I just really wanted to show how I go from start to finish painting a portrait. So I've got the original image, I turn it to black and white. This really helps me see value scale. I have a sketch outline of the image, so I'm working from that as well. Now I use a projector. I will share with you the projector that I use, and I project the image on the canvas. I use a Neo Color 2, and I just give myself a general basic knowledge base of the proportions and the areas that I'm going to focus on. I always start in on any of my work with a darker value, the darkest value. So I find the darkest darks on my piece, and then I go ahead and I move around the piece, finding the next dark or the next lightest. I start from dark and then just keep working lighter. So I am using that darkest value. I'm using probably a size 6 brush. So it's not a very thick, wide brush. I do like using long-handled brushes because it kind of puts me further back and looser. I do not have a lot of paint on my brush at this point. I consider this the mapping stage of my artwork. I go through 3 stages, no matter what the subject, no matter what I'm working on. The first one is the sketch layer, and that's what you see there. The second one is the mapping layer. And as I'm working in this mapping layer, I'm basically identifying the areas that are going to be each value. I start with the darkest dark, I kind of map that in, and I save space. And I refer to that a lot. I save space for the value. So I don't just paint the whole thing dark and then paint the next lightest layer up and like that. I literally, like puzzle pieces, save the space for that color. Now, yes, when I get to the last layer, which is the refinement layer, you will see me layer in color on top to blend and stuff like that. But for the most part, that is what I'm doing. So as I am looking and working my way around the piece, I am finding how the shadows cast onto the face as I'm working with those darker layers. Then I start to shift somewhere in the middle and find the highlights. And you'll see as that is working through how the face starts to become dimensional because dark colors recede and light colors come forward. And in my painting process, this is really important to work through. And each artist comes to a canvas in their own process. Mine is intrinsically to capture the expressive nature of light on an object. And in this case, it's a face, a portrait. And you can see just working around, I try to remember too as I'm working that if it's this shadow here, it might be that shadow somewhere else. You can see sometimes I forget to do, like she's got basically a top, shoulders are bare. She's a spaghetti strap dress on. But try to remember to move that light down across the figure. So I am using a brush when I work in this mapping layer. I don't always use a brush. Sometimes I just use intrinsically that catalyst wedge and go all in. But for this, because I knew the person, sometimes when you don't know the person, it's easier to be a little looser. But because I actually knew this person and I sent this painting to this person and her family, I wanted to make sure that I captured her in the correct way before I went in with my expressionistic style. So just note to self that even though it seems like I always work crazy loose, I do get also a little tight, and sometimes when I'm like, I just want to make sure this is going to resonate the correct way with the people that know her best. So you can see that my value scale, I'm working in a much more mid-toned value scale as I'm working down. She is starting to get dimensional. You can see as a flat sketch, it was just kind of nothing, and now she's starting to extract through the canvas, and that's literally by using the shadow and the light. Dark colors fall back, light colors come forward, and this tells the viewer that the darker parts are further away from you and the lighter parts are closer to you. And that's how our brain processes what we are seeing. It does it all by itself. The brain is just fantastic that way. And we as artists kind of learn to use the information the brain sees through color and value and paint them on the canvas. So it's kind of like you're a scientist. All right, so I'm still just shaping around the mouth. Whenever I do go into a painting, you will see that most of my portraits, I leave the lips after I get the skin tone done. I'm still kind of finalizing how that light is falling on her skin, putting shadows in. She has necklaces, so I'm saving space, meaning I'm not painting it all skin tone and then putting the necklace on top. I am literally saving the space where those pearls and that chain is going to be. Again, that's part of my process that I want to share with you. As acrylic artists, you might find that you paint something a solid color and then work up building in the shadow and light. I strongly suggest that if you haven't, try it. You may not like it, you may love it. But that idea of saving space really makes you aware of how the pieces of value really play off of each other. They are parts of each other. They need each other to bounce off of. And if we save space for them, we're actually doing due diligence by them by putting them in and kind of keeping their structure intact. Again, playing on the shadow and light, you'll see how she takes shape. Becoming seers of value is really what you want to hone in on. You cannot paint what you can't see. So if you can become a better seer of how shadow and light shapes the face, you'll become better painters of faces. I don't form the nose by drawing the nose in and painting the nose. I paint the nose by rendering the value scale, the shadow that shapes and the highlight that shapes the nose. So it's just a different way to come at it. Those of you that are drawers and that's how you've learned to structure faces, this is something that's going to go in opposition of that. So I'm asking you to not see line. I'm asking you to see shadow and light. So if you're finding that difficult, totally get that. It's just the way we process. And, not all, again, there is not the right answer to all people. There is going to be somebody that was like, oh my God, this is life-changing. I didn't know that. And there's going to be people that are watching this going, that makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't like that. Or you might just take one or two parts of it that work into your style. And that's why I make this available, because I think the more we share our process, the more as artists we can grow. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And I am also aware that teeth I find difficult, so I am kind of leaving them. I painted the shadow, the dark, in the space between the teeth in their smile, and she's got the most beautiful expression on her face, and it's just pure joy, and that's why I just was compelled to paint this. Also, I think that as an expressionistic painter, being able to capture laughter and make it painterly loose is kind of like my happy sweet spot. So I wanted to also share that with you as well. So you can see with some of that chat, and I know it's not a direct, like you're watching it, how I'm not actually teaching let's this step, this step, this step. It's more about the process. I think if first we understand the process, then the techniques, it's a lot easier. We have to be able to see, we have to become seers. And what I'm asking and sharing with you here is to maybe look more at the original image and less at the painting, and seeing how I'm interpreting from the original image what to do next and where to put my next mark and shadow. You see, I'm kind of tiptoeing around the lips, the teeth, the mouth. It's so important. We take for granted how important a smile is to the expressiveness of the face. So I am in the back of my mind kind of playing that. I just want to get this correct. And there are a lot of values that puzzle piece into making this work. I also want to talk a second about lips. Lips are actually not just bright pink or bright red. They're actually a more pinkish version of a skin tone. So when I'm painting them, I'm also highly aware that I should just take a skin tone that matches closer and put some more red, or in this case alizarin crimson, in it to make it more a fleshier pink tone. When we do a portrait and then we go in with like bright red lips or bright pink lips, unless the painting actually has that in it, then we do it a little disservice. The other thing is there is value that is captured in the shaping of the lips. The front of the lips is going to be further and closer to the viewer. The corners of the lips are going to be further back. So it's not all one color as we go around. Just in capturing that there is darker values, the corners of the lips are going to be very, very dark, and then it's going to come a little bit lighter in the front. The top lip is usually darker than the bottom lip in most cases. Also, if you think about how the lips frame around the teeth, the lip that curls under and touches the teeth is going to be darker underneath. There is the flesh that is out closer to the viewer. So think about how light hits that. If you are new to faces and you've been just painting lips flat and you're like, I don't know why this is keep getting flat, it could be just a simple shadow and light issue. And now you'll see me going in with the wedge. This is the Catalyst wedge. I'll make a link to this too. This is my preferred painting tool, especially when I'm feeling expressionistic and loose. I am able to pick up, and I'm using the same exact colors, but I am just now using the map that I created by painting in those colors to know what color to go into as I put thicker layers and pixelated layers and less blended layers of paint down. And that's why that map is important to me, because it kind of gives me the information I need so that when I go in loose and thicker layers with the Catalyst wedge, I know really where to put it. The painting process just becomes this like carefree, loose thing. And I think that resonates through the layers as well. And you can see that she's starting to get a little bit more plump, distinct. The layers are becoming thicker. So what you're seeing as this kind of sketchy, thin layer of paint is going to now start to become much thicker and more intense. I have still left the teeth. I do not like to paint teeth. I can paint teeth, but I don't find them as enjoyable as painting noses or ears or cheeks or lips or necks for that matter. So I do kind of save the part that I'm less happy with painting for last. And teeth are hard because you don't want them to look like chiclets when you're done, but I'll eventually get to them. Look at how I'm twisting my wrist. I'm picking up paint. I'm twisting. I'm using that edge, that shorter edge of the wedge. I will even paint details with this because I know that I'm painting loose and suggestive. I really like how that loose mark making enhances the intention or even the expression of the process. So I just find that enjoyable. If this is the first time you're using a Catalyst wedge, please know that you are going to be incredibly frustrated if you're working on a small piece. I've been doing this for a while, so know that I've actually built up a little bit of a knowledge base. I've been painting like this for about 2 years now, so you're looking at 2 years worth of using a tool versus maybe this is your first time. So don't get really hard on yourself. A really great way to modify using this tool is they make smaller Catalyst wedges. You're still picking up a larger amount of paint, placing it down. You can see I'm not like rubbing it in. I'm kind of like almost putting a little bit of pressure and just kind of placing that there, even refining with a brush. They make smaller Catalyst tools with handles, but you also can just do this by loading up the brush with more paint and placing it down without over blending it. So there's a ways to modify the expressive quality. Just try not to overwork. And you know who you are if you are someone that keeps overworking, and you're getting mud. Try to put the paint down and not brush it. So place it in a brush stroke and walk away. Take the next amount of paint, place it in a brush stroke, walk away. That's kind of what the Catalyst wedge is doing here. My process is really a way to get myself to this point, if that makes sense. So everything you've seen up to me getting this Catalyst wedge in my hand was an effort to make it easier to pick up the Catalyst wedge and just slap paint down in thick chunks. And everybody's going to have their own comfort level with that as well. If you are using straight, heavy-bodied acrylic paint, you're going to find you're not going to have as much texture. If you put something like an extra heavy gel medium in it, you're going to find a really nice, juicy, thick layer of paint. if you're new and you're finding the thickness uncomfortable, then also like figure out to modify that too. But again, I just want to put these ideas in your head. This lesson, this class is more about kind of giving you a foundation for understanding. I don't expect out of the gate for you to just be painting portraits if you've never painted portraits before. But again, in building an understanding, there are some components that go into an artist's process that are not just straight out of the gate, go for it type of things. But in putting them in perspective, then you can start thinking about, how do you set up your painting practice? Do you mix your colors? Do you think about all the different values? Are you looking at light? Do you work from a color photo versus a black and white? How does that change the way you see things? Um, are you choosing images that are straight focused or tilted, or are they more difficult because there's patterns involved? All of those types of things go into the thought process before I choose something to work in. But I also think it's also something to think about as you're choosing your subject as well. Also, working from somebody you know, I feel is much more difficult. I would say work from a subject you don't have any emotional ties with, or not a face you look at every day, because you're going to find it much harder to walk away from an imperfect painting. And I actually strive for imperfection when I paint. I think there is beauty in the broken. I think that's why the marks that I leave that are unblended and rough, I like that. I think that that adds to the character of the piece, and more of an emotional potential to have that. I feel like it leaves space in between the lines, in between the marks, for someone to interject their own storyline, their own narrative, maybe see themselves in it, maybe try to attach a story, maybe look for a story in it. I think if all of the loose ends are tied up and clean and smooth, there's less of an ability to fit yourself into the component as a viewer. And I really do want in my artwork to invite the viewer into it, to invite the viewer to possibly have their own narrative, to wonder what that smile means, to maybe even um, find themselves smiling when looking at it, and feeling like in the disjointed areas, in the rough, non-blended areas, they can find themselves smiling with the piece. So as an artist, that's what my intention, that's what I'm interjecting, that's what I hope that the people looking at my work take out of it. And as I'm painting that, that's something that is stylistically me. You're going to find when you're painting, your focus is going to be on parts that you find is really important as well. So as a process, it is just more than technique. As artists, we come to the piece. The execution of a piece is not found in the end result. It is found through each mark that we make, and each emotion we interject, and each broken bit in this case, and each shadow and light and twist of the wrist as I'm laying down color, and thickness if I'm loading up and leaving a very heavy mark, or if I'm thinly suggesting something. A painter's process is so expansive. When you take lessons as artists, try to see beyond just the stroke. Try to see if somewhere between you, the knowledge, the mark making, the style, and the process, you can find something that's intuitively unique and that you can take away from it. All right, so I've been probably talking on my little soapbox long enough. As you see, I'm going back to the mouth. I am clearly not as expressive, not as heavy-handed when I'm coming to a detail that I'm not comfortable with, or not sure I want to make the focal point. Her smile is important, but I don't want the teeth to become what you see first. And because the teeth are white, because they are lighter, light comes forward, dark recedes, I run the risk of making the teeth the only thing you can see. So I am aware of that. And I am also aware of how the mouth shapes around them and how can I soften and push back, in this case, the corners of the mouth, the teeth at the corners of the mouth. I know that I need to make them more shadowier at the corners of the mouth because those teeth in the front are closer to the viewer and those teeth in the back are further away. I need to add some shading without making them look like they're dirty, without making them look like they've got cavities. So I am aware of these things as I'm working. And what you'll see me doing is formulating the tongue so that I'm working the area, the puzzle pieces, the bits of information the viewer will see around the teeth is just as important as the teeth themselves. And again, tiptoeing. I'm like, okay, I've done a little bit there. Let me walk around. Let me refine some other areas. So this process is as if you're a fly on the wall watching me navigate it. This is not necessarily a step by step. It's important to see how an artist works when no one's watching. And that's what I want you to take away. Now you see, I will go in. I have a lot of things thicker or painted in more thick areas. But now you see I'm able to add more of the highlight. And you see me just refining it around the face. Now I'm ready to go in with the hair. So this is black. Very seldomly do I use black to mix into a color, to add a shadow. But her hair is black. So when I want something to be distinctly black, I will use it. But black is a very invasive color, especially in oil, because it stays wet. So I'm also very aware that I want to make sure I have most of the stuff in the face done before I go ahead in with the black. But her hair has tons of highlights around it as well. So if you notice how I'm putting down the black, I am finding the darkest dark areas of her hair and saving space for the lighter areas of her hair. Again, this is a process-driven decision. I do not want to paint everything black and then make things lighter. I want to hold space. The light is important. The shadow is important. I save space for it. I respect it. And that's how I kind of choose to see it. I respect the areas and their values. So I'm going in with the darkest darks, and then I will go ahead in with the next lightest area. I also like to keep the hair pixelated. Hair is not a solid, heavy mass. It's airy. So you will see me making sure that I'm keeping the integrity of that as well. So I don't want the hair to look like a helmet. One of the things also to consider is how the relationship between hair and face interact. You can see now it's kind of making sense. There is a shadow on the forehead. It's because that hair is casting a shadow on the skin. That interaction is very important. Just going in. Because now also you'll find too, I will move around the piece because now that hair is just giving me a bit more of the story that makes sense in the interaction. And that's important for me to do as well. Kind of constantly reevaluate how that shadow and light plays off of each other. So I will move around the piece. I feel like now that that hair is in place, it does kind of feel a little bit more like I've got more of that storyline going around the whole body. There's shadow cast on the shoulders. There's shadow cast, on the face, on the chest, on the neck. And that's how I kind of work to synthesize my way around the piece. I'm putting in, she's wearing like a sapphire dress. I do know this from the original image, and I was there. This is from their prom, and she had a beautiful sapphire dress, so I'm making sure I'm putting that in. This is ultramarine blue. Certainly when it comes to just putting blue straps, you can put any color. It doesn't have to be a special mix, but it is ultramarine blue. I do have a little bit of white. I'm making some value in that as well. The strap isn't just solid. It has light casting off of it. It's a shimmery satin material. So I'm making sure when I'm putting that in, it's just not a flat color. I always use value, even if it's just a solid color and a highlight. But typically I use 2 or 3 different values of a color to really create the dimension and the texture and the personality. And that's kind of what I like in painting. I like to put these I call it pixelated, but really painterly marks of value. My favorite part is putting in this white. I've talked about this white a lot in classes. And if this is new to you, I want to just talk to you about what this white background means. Now, I know that you see the white already there, but I think it's important that as a background and subject, you need to have all parts of the canvas surface a part of the story. Don't leave it behind. This canvas is an 11 by 14, and the entire surface area is part of the piece. Don't leave an unpainted background go. It should meet the subject where it is and interact with it. So that's why this white going on there is important. I'm using it to put in also the necklace. But this white background is something that is important to where I am now. It's important to my message. It's important to who I am. I feel it didn't start this way, but what it's become is that white, thick, textural background is like casting a spotlight on a subject. It is my way of expressing you are important. You are the focus. The spotlight is on you. You have something to say. It envelops in freedom and in also a lot of ways, even though it's a bright white light, warmth. It's another way of saying you are seen, you are heard. And so most of my work recently has had this stark white background, and it might seem like nothing, but when I put that in, it's almost like a signature. It's like saying everything when that white background wraps the subject in that layer of warmth and light and seen and heard. So again, that might not be what you want to do on your piece, and you might not have even recognized that or felt that, and you're like, Donna, that's great, but I didn't feel that in your work. But that's what it means when I paint it in. And again, that's part of a process. An artist has all of these things that go into it. And when you start focusing solely on technique and execution, you might actually be doing a disservice to your artistic process. And in developing a process means that you get to take all the risks in the world, and you get to define the parts of the whole that are intrinsically yours. And I find that empowering. I find that the magic of being an artist. It's not in the execution and the technique and the exactness. It's in all of the parts of the process that help you tell your story. And I think Koryn is a great example of that too, with the expressiveness and her being a strong, young Black woman making her way in the world, and her process and all of our process. Could you imagine being that young woman starting, fresh with a clean slate? And I just think that that's important to our growth. I think it's important to our growth. And you see now, I have been in the refinement layer for a little while. I probably should have earmarked that sooner. But as soon as I picked up that catalyst wedge, I'm taking that map and refining it. But now really is the honing in on that refinement. There might be certain areas that I don't like expressively. So I'm just going to touch that or refine it or tweak it. I'm stepping back. I'm looking. I love how when the white went into the background, I did go in and pop some more black in, but it is that give and take. It's the dance. The background must interact with the foreground. They must have some relationship to each other. If you paint an 11 by 14 piece and you only focus on the subject and you leave, 8 inches of the piece untouched, you are actually not capitalizing on the entire surface area. So it's really important to me. You'll see even in that white background how I've broken the line. I call it blurring the line between the subject and the background. I think that's important stylistically too. I love that marriage of the two things. So you can really be expressive as you want, even when it just comes to a shoulder blade or the way the light casts. And again, I think that white shining, it feels like shining on her shoulders when I do that. So it's important to me. Just refining around the lip area, that's one of the places I don't love. But I think in the end, she's expressive. She's beautiful. She's radiant. It makes me feel good. I hope it makes you feel good when you see her. And I hope you walk away from this class, this lesson, being a believer in your own process. And that's what I want to empower you to do. think about your process. Think about you as a seer, and think about what you're injecting into your artwork that is uniquely yours and intrinsically sets your mark making, your story, your narrative apart from other people, and how you really kind of identify who you are as an artist through your entire working of a painting. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Koryn, for being a beautiful subject, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson.